What is up, Detroit Sports Nation, baseball fans, and Detroit Tigers fans? I am AJ Reilly here for another edition of The Corner. You gotta excuse the voice a little bit. Sounds a little bit deeper, a little bit raspier, because I was at Ford Field yesterday as the Lions scored 45 points and still found another way to lose. But it is baseball season, and this is a baseball show, so we're going to have to let that, mistake, not really a mistake because it was a great time, but we're just going to have to deal with the consequences of me being at one of the greatest places to watch a football game, Ford Field, as we power through this show. We got a lot on tap today. We are going to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals and the way that they handled two of their greatest players ever walking away from the game this season. We're going to talk about the Tigers and their beating the Minnesota Twins in a weekend series. We got a preview with the Seattle Mariners coming up, and I want to talk about Miguel Cabrera and 2023 because some news came out this weekend about him returning in 2023 after having a meeting with AJ Hinch and President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris. Before we get to any of that, I do want to remind you to like and follow and subscribe to Detroit Sports Nation wherever you're at. You can also follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner for any type of baseball discussion that you want. If you want Detroit sports content, you got to make sure to click that bell on YouTube. Smash it as hard as you can to get notifications when our latest content drops. So let's travel to St. Louis for the leadoff today and the way that they handled two of their legends, Yadier Molina and Albert Pujols, stepping away from the game of baseball after two fantastic careers. And there's some speculation as to whether or not another legend of theirs, Adam Wainwright, will also step away from the game as well at the end of the season. Now, he hasn't been very clear on whether or not he's going to step away, and it's going to be very interesting to see if he comes back for just a little bit more with a little bit left in the tank. But what is so amazing about the way that the Cardinals handled this situation is their manager, Carlos Marmol. He did a phenomenal thing in Sunday's finale. It was the last home game that these three will play together, and the starter for that game was Adam Wainwright. Now, they had retirement ceremonies before the game for Yadier and for Albert Pujols. Pujols also hit number 701 and 702 while they were in St. Louis this week. And when Wainwright was going to be removed from the game, Marmol comes out and not only removes Wainwright, but he also removes Pujols, and he also removes Yadier Molina and allows them to exit stage left to the applause of their hometown crowd. Now, they're going to have more home games because the playoffs are right around the corner, and they won the division, and we've talked about playoff breakdowns and all that in the last episode, so if you want to check that out, make sure that you're hitting that episode number 36, because we got all the playoff predictions and breakdown of things that transpired prior to this weekend, which everything's basically been decided except for the NL East and the NL final wild card spot, but that's not for this show. This show is specifically about the St. Louis Cardinals in the leadoff today and the way that Marmol handled this. Now, he could have just gone out and taken Wainwright out of the game, but he let these three have their moment. And too often in sports, I think we worry so much about, the winning of the game, which rightfully so. Winning the game is the utmost important. It is the thing that has to precede every other motivation in the game. But this game wasn't necessarily meaningful in the sense that it affected their standings. The division had already been locked up. They cannot challenge for the best record in the NL to have home field advantage throughout the playoffs because the Dodgers are at 110 wins. So Marmol stepped back and took an opportunity to honor three guys who have given decades to this franchise. They got their curtain call. They were able to walk off the field together as they walked onto the field together so many years ago. Pujols, Wainwright, and Molina are three integral parts to the Cardinals and the success that they've had. Now, we know that Pujols left and went to Los Angeles for a number of years, but he was always a Cardinal. Molina and Wainwright just set the record for the most appearances together as a battery, pitcher and catcher combination. When you talk about Cardinals history, you would be bereft to not mention these three guys together. When you talk about some of the greatest players, integral parts to the success of the franchise, you have to mention them together. And Marmol did a great thing by letting them have their moment to walk off together. It's been incredible. It's been an incredible run. Pujols was for sure, surefire Hall of Famer. A lot of speculation as to whether or not Yadier will be a Hall of Famer, and we can get into that discussion at some point. I don't know if there's, a lot that can be said here, but when you're talking about a guy who, for his career has been one of the best defensive catchers to ever play the game, and as Wainwright said, other than number 5 over there, he's one of the most clutch players that he's ever played with as well. There's definitely going to be some debate. Do I think that he gets in first ballot? No, I don't think Yadier gets in first ballot. But when we're talking about a career guy who amassed numbers that are, pretty good for a defense-first catcher, the case is there. I mean, 2,100 hits, 176 home runs, over 1,000 RBIs. And that just takes into his offensive, statistics. A 277 career hitter just goes in to build the resume. And I definitely think that there's going to be a case for Yadier. But what's not to be lost in this whole discussion is this. The way that Marmol handled this and the way that he honored these three guys is fantastic. It's going to be exciting to see them have one final run in the playoffs because they've earned it. These are three guys that have been at the top of their profession for a long time. And I'm glad that Marmol did exactly what he did in order to make sure that they had their moment riding off into the sunset for the final regular season game at Busch Stadium that they have. I'm not rooting for the Cardinals in the playoffs, to be honest with you. I don't really care. With the Tigers not in, I don't really have a team that I pull for when it comes to the playoffs. I just like watching exciting baseball. Like the Mets and the Braves this weekend was phenomenal. I just like watching exciting baseball. I'm not necessarily pulling for them, but it wouldn't be a bad thing to see, two guys walk out with the World Series championship, kind of like Peyton Manning did when he retired after winning the Super Bowl. I don't think they'll get there. I mean, there's too many good teams in the NL. But stranger things have happened, right? And so it's going to be very interesting and very fun and very exciting to watch these guys play their final games at the beginning of this week and then heading into the playoffs. We're going to get now to the recap of the Minnesota series with the Tigers, but before we do that, I do want to remind you about GearUpDetroit.shop. Make sure you are using Corner 25 off to get a discount on the freshest DSN swag that you can get around. There are soft t-shirts. It's a quick and simple process. Make sure you use Corner 25 off to get the latest Detroit Sports Nation swag. And we may even have some t-shirt contests coming up, maybe some design contests that we can get some t-shirts sold and get some more original designs out there. So stay tuned. Make sure you're tuning in. Make sure you're subscribing to all the social medias for those type of contests, because this is one of the last corners that are going to be twice a week, because baseball season is ending and we're going to move the corner to a once-a-week show, and most likely it's going to be a live show. So we will go again on Thursday. I'll see you on Thursday, and then after that, it'll just be a once-a-week show that you're going to be here to get your fill of baseball, even when baseball is not around. So that's the announcement that we have to make, and we want to move right into the recap where the Tigers won another series and have not lost a series since Scott Harris was hired as president of baseball operations. That's significant. I've said it before. I will continue to say it again. It's the Scott Harris effect. Guys that are actually playing for their jobs, they know that he's evaluating, and they're playing quite well. Now look, 10 of the last 12, they've won. That's pretty significant. They swept the White Sox, swept the Royals, lost 1 to Baltimore, and lost 1 to the Twins. They've won 10 out of 12 games. It would have been nice to do this kind of thing earlier in the season and actually become what the Baltimore Orioles were. The Baltimore Orioles were projected to have the same win total that the Tigers had, but they won 20 more games in their projection. The Tigers have not won 20 more games in their projection. Let's just put it that way. That's the kind way of saying it. But they've been playing good baseball. It hasn't been perfect baseball, as AJ said after the game yesterday. It hasn't been perfect baseball, but it's been good baseball. Game 1, they lost. Joe Ryan, dude was electric. It's not like he blows you away with the fastball, but his fastball is deceptive enough to get on you quicker than you would think it would. He had 8 Ks through 6 innings. And the Twins won 7-0. Not much to discuss about that game. They won 7-0. And you thought, well, maybe the good feelings have rubbed off. But no. The Tigers came back on Saturday. They're in a tight game. The Twins make an error, which gave them the go-ahead run. And I think it was the 7th inning. And then at the top of the 8th inning, the Tigers let the Twins load the bases. They bring in Gregory Soto with 1 out. He walks the bases loaded, okay? But then gets a ground ball double play that helps secure the win for the Tigers. And they win 3-2. You notice that they've won a lot more one-run games recently, too. And then we go into Sunday. Eric Haas homered for the 2nd time in the series. Victor Reyes homered again. Excuse me. I mean, Victor Reyes hit a bomb to right center field off of former friend Michael Fulmer, I might add. But the Tigers won 5-2, won the series. That's now 4 series in a row that they've won, playing good baseball. Now let's talk about Victor Reyes for a second, right? We've got a big guy here that loves to pound the ball into the ground because of the swing that he takes. He's got to find a way to translate his build into a power hitting type of guy. He's got such a long swing that the ball is through, or the bat is through the zone so long, and his hands are like so away from his body when he's swinging, that even the home run that he hit was such a long swing. They've got to find a way this offseason to get him to transition to become more of a line drive, high exit velocity, high launch, like pure launch angle, not high launch angle, because a high launch angle is a pop-up, but a pure, like, power-hitting launch angle type of swing, because if he can translate into that, he could be a decent piece. Not a superstar, but a piece. And another piece that I want to talk about, too, is the guy that's on the screen, Eric Haas. He's been really good this season, and a bright spot to a certain extent. Now, look, I get it. When he had a long run last season, there were a lot of holes that were exposed in his swing that many believed he couldn't be a, everyday catcher. But this season, over 300 at-bats, 114 weighted runs created, 14% above Major League average. He's a 1.5 WAR player. He's got 14 home runs, 257 average, a 326 weighted on base average. He's a great and cheap option as a catcher next year. He's got a 27% K rate, which we know Scott Harris wants you to command the strike zone, so he needs to clean that up. But, he's been better offensively than Barnhart's been. He had 2 home runs in the series against the Twins. He has nearly 30% hard hit rate and a very little soft contact rate at only 18%. I definitely think moving forward in 2023, Eric Haas has to be part of the plan. Maybe some type of split or platoon. Maybe you bring Barnhart back on a cheaper contract. I don't know necessarily, because Barnhart's a really good defensive catcher. They also need to find a way to shorten up his swing, especially in Comerica Park, if they don't mess with the dimensions. But Barnhart and Haas would not be a bad catching situation next year if they were to make a run at Barnhart for a, 1 to 2 year investment, minimal dollars that they can assign there would be great. And we're going to get into an off-season breakdown blueprint. I've got to do some research and some studying. It's going to take a little bit longer to put that together, but I will do an off-season blueprint of what moves the Tigers should make, and that'll be on a live show where you, the fans, can interact with me, and we can discuss all about the Detroit Tigers at those times. But before we get into the preview and the final 4 games of the Detroit Tigers season. I do want to remind you one more time, wherever you're at on social media, make sure that you are liking, subscribing, and following along. And make sure you follow me on Twitter at DSN at the corner. Let's go to Seattle. 4 games in 3 days. A game Monday night at 9:40. A game Tuesday at 6:10, and then a nightcap following that. And then the season finale is going to be Wednesday at 4:10. So let's get into some pitching matchups, and then we will talk also about the Detroit Tigers and how they match up with the Seattle Mariners. Now listen, I know that you know that the Mariners are a very good baseball team. They have secured a playoff spot for the first time in 20 plus years, on a walk-off home run hit by Cal Raleigh. And the call that their play-by-play guy made was phenomenal. I saw it on TikTok last night, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly how you're supposed to call baseball games. Like, it was phenomenal. They are a very, very, very good team. In fact, they sit 10th in offensive production on Fangraphs. 22.8% K rate, a 10% walk rate. They got 270 batting average on balls in play, 106 weighted runs created. They've got an offensive WAR of 30.4. They're a good team, a good offensive team. Pitching, they were 16th on Fangraphs. Pitching, they're 16th on Fangraphs, and the Tigers are going to be in a situation where they can avoid the Mariners' best 2 hitters. Or pitchers, not hitters, pitchers. With the wild card series coming up on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week, the Tigers are going to avoid Luis Castillo and Robbie Ray. I'm almost certain of it. Even though the season finale has a to be determined for the Mariners, neither of those guys are pitching on Wednesday. I can guarantee you that they are not pitching on Wednesday. Because if they pitch on Wednesday, they will not be available for the wild card series unless they're pitching on short rest, which is possible. But then if you get past the wild card, that messes things up too. So you're not going to see their best 2 pitchers. Who the Tigers are going to see is this, situation when it comes to pitching. In Game 1, Monday night, Brian Garcia for the Tigers is going to be pitching against George Kirby. George Kirby's 8-4 on the season with a 3.21 ERA, strikes out about a batter per inning. He walks only about 1 batter per 9 innings, has a 3.27 batting average on balls in play, and a 2.89 FIP. So he's been pitching actually a lot better than even his ERA would indicate. Now, Brian Garcia is going to have to limit the walks. Because if you allow this team to get on base, this team is going to create havoc. This team is also going to hit the ball and hit the ball hard. Eugenio Suarez, just don't get me started on Eugenio Suarez, who very well could be a Tiger right now, but he's not. Eugenio Suarez, we got Julio Rodriguez, all these different guys that can just pound the baseball. So you got to make sure that you're pitching well, and when they put the ball in play, you're turning those balls into outs. Brian Garcia is going to get the start. Hopefully he can make the game competitive to give our offense a chance. The first game of a doubleheader on Tuesday. Eduardo Rodriguez is going to make his final start of the season. He's 5-5 with a 4.02 ERA. He pitched pretty well last outing. And hopefully, again, can finish the season on a high note. He's going to be facing off against Marco Gonzalez, who's 10-15 with a 4.14 ERA. He strikes only about 5 per 9 innings, walks 2.5 per 9 innings, and has a 5.15 FIP. So definitely an opportunity for the Tigers to take advantage of Game 1 of the doubleheader. In Game 2 of the doubleheader, we do not know who is pitching for the Tigers. Could be a bullpen day. This would be the spot for Matt Manning, but he obviously is out right now. That to be determined is going to be facing off against Chris Flexen, who's 8-9 with a 3.64 ERA, a 6.26 K per 9, a 3.37 walks per 9, 270 batting average on balls in play, and a 4.45 FIP, which means he's been pitching worse than what his ERA would indicate. That's going to be Game 2. You wanna find a way to at least, at minimum, split the doubleheader. Game 4, Tyler Alexander is going to be facing To be determined. Now, we know Alexander's been a little bit better since over the last few weeks. He had a rough patch there for a while, but he's corrected it a little bit, had a little bit of a rough outing in his last start. But this is going to be another situation where the Tigers can take advantage and maybe end the season with a win, because right now it's to be determined for the Seattle Mariners. And again, we go back to the reason why it's to be determined is this is most likely a slot for Luis Castillo or Robbie Ray, but it's not going to be one of those guys. If they pitch one of those guys in this series, it's almost going to be malpractice to a certain extent. These games mean nothing for the Seattle Mariners. Because here's the deal, they've locked up a wild card spot. They have a 1.5 game lead over Tampa Bay right now, which means if everything holds true, they'll be traveling to Toronto to play the Blue Jays in a 3-game series. If they end up falling to the third wild card spot, they will travel to Cleveland for a 3-game series. So the question becomes, when you're facing Cleveland or Toronto, do you want to be without Luis Castillo or Robbie Ray? No, you don't. So this will most likely be some kind of spot start, some kind of bullpen game for the Seattle Mariners, and an opportunity for the Tigers to end the season with a win. You got 4 games in Seattle. Are they going to win the series? I don't know. Most likely not. But even if they split the series, and in their last 5 series of the season, they don't have a single series loss, that's good momentum going into 2023. Now, does momentum carry over from one season to the other? No, I am not a believer in that, but at least it ends the season on a high note, and it gives Scott Harris enough information, I would say, to make good baseball decisions, which he's going to do. And we're going to talk about some of those baseball decisions right now. In our final segment, the Peanut Gallery, let's talk about Miguel Cabrera and his farewell tour. It came out this weekend that the Tigers, president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, you're going to keep hearing that name, and you're going to hear that name a lot over the next few weeks as we discuss the Tigers and their offseason plans. But Harris and AJ Hinch and Miguel Cabrera sat down, and they fully intend to bring him back to the team in 2023. Which they should. I mean, this is the obvious decision to make. You cannot just get rid of Miguel Cabrera. That he made the right decision. You can say, we don't need him. He's taking up a roster spot. It does not matter. This is Miguel Cabrera. This is a guy that has spent a lot of time in Detroit. He is an absolute legend in Detroit. You do not cast those guys away. I understand that nostalgia is a powerful drug. I get it. And if there were a way to pay him and put him into some type of advisory role or something like that, I get that. I understand that. And even when I interviewed Lynn Henning, and Lynn said that he thinks that the doctors and AJ and Scott Harris will all get together and they'll kind of discuss and make a plan that Miguel's pride is he wants to be a great player, and if he doesn't feel like he can, he'll step away. Sure, and that could happen during the season. But I've also discussed on this show how the Tigers can have a Pujolsian kind of renaissance if they limit the usage of Miggy during the season, specifically during the first half of the season. Only let him bat against lefties. Let him get, one full game during a series and then maybe come off the bench to pinch hit. But the reality is that he's going to be back in 2023, and it is going to be his farewell tour, as it should be, because he's earned that right. What that role will be and how often he is in the lineup is yet to be seen. But this was Scott Harris's number one decision that he had to make this offseason, and he's already made the right one. You cannot get rid of a Miguel Cabrera. He will be in a Tigers uniform through the end of his contract, which is next season. Now, does he finish the season? I don't know. Maybe they have plans to have a Miguel Cabrera weekend and send him off, kind of like they did with Victor Martinez, a few years ago. But this was the right decision. He will come back, he will play, and this will be a farewell tour, as we saw Pujols have, this season. And don't forget, the schedule is changing next season. So Miguel's going to be in a lot more ballparks for a lot more, pomp and circumstance. Again, not a bad thing for one of the greatest right-handed hitters not only of this generation, but of all time. This is the right decision. So check mark for Scott Harris. Good job on decision number 1. Way to go. Congratulations for getting it right, which was obvious, right? There was no way you were going to get this wrong, but I applaud you for doing the right thing. And let's not forget, in that report, he also said that he had they had a conversation, and Miguel knows what he needs to do to uphold the standards that they want to uphold, to be a part of this team. So now the onus is also on Miguel Cabrera to come back ready to play in 2023 and be a contributing member of this team. Miguel said he's going to get stronger. He's going to get the knee healthier. That's good. And hopefully, through enough acquisitions, he can go down in the lineup and have less pressure on him as well. So kudos. 2023 is off to a great start because the number one decision that needed to be made was made. And it was the correct decision. So, Tigers fans, gear up because 2023 is going to be about a new direction and sending off an old legend. That's going to do it for us here on The Corner. I am AJ Reilly. I want to thank you for stopping by. I want to remind you that I will be back on Thursday to recap this series with the Seattle Mariners, and there will be no preview because there's no other series after this one. The baseball season ends on Wednesday. We will gear up for the playoffs on Thursday as well. And then, moving forward, we will be going live once a week to discuss baseball because you can never get too much baseball. I will see you then on Thursday, and until then, as always, go Tigers.